Hello, welcome back. We are discussing the topics on 8086 microprocessor. In the previous videos, we have discussed the pin diagram, the internal architecture of 8086. We have seen the programming model of 8086. We have seen the memory organization, the interfacing of the memory with the 8086. In this video, we will be going through topics on the minimum and max mode of operation. So, while discussing the topic on minimum and maximum mode of 8086 operations, we will be going through different topics. We will be starting our discussion with the things that are responsible for the minimum and the maximum mode of operation. We will see what are the differences between the minimum and maximum mode. What are the situations you require it to operate in the minimum mode, and when do you want the 8086 to operate in a maximum mode. Then we will see the signals of the minimum mode and how the 8086 is configured in the minimum mode. Then we will see the operation of the 8086 in the minimum mode with the help of the timing diagram. Then we will see the things for the maximum mode of operation and the configuration and some internal details of the microprocessor operating in the maximum mode of operation. To start with, let us see the pin diagram. Have a look at the pin diagram of the 8086 again. And what do you see when you look at the pin diagram? We find at the top written for your reference the maximum mode and the minimum mode. The pins which are responsible or which differentiate the minimum and the maximum mode are these pins, pin number 24 to pin number 31. Where in the minimum mode, the device will work something similar to the processor, that is 8085, and in the case of maximum mode, we can make use of the 8086 to operate in a multi-process environment. So the signals that can be seen here, we have a signal hold HLDA for the DMA control. We have the write signal. We have the memory oblique IO bar, data transmit oblique receive, the data direction, data enable, ALE address latch enable, and the INTA. So similar kind of signals were available on the 8085 as well. Then we have the signals which change their meanings when we operate this in the maximum mode. We find that instead of hold, we have the request or grant 0, request and grant 1, then lock, then you have the status signal S0, S1, S2, and the queue status signals QS0 and QS1. So with these signals, let's now discuss the differences between the minimum and the maximum. When you look back at the pin diagram, you have a pin, that is pin number 33, which is written as a MN/MX bar. And we know when a signal is complemented, that is low activated. So that means when you apply a high logic here on pin number 33, 8086 will operate in the minimum mode. When you apply or when you connect it to the ground, the processor will operate in a maximum mode. So that is the one difference. When MN/MX bar is connected to high, then it is the minimum mode. When it is connected to ground, then it operates in the maximum mode. In maximum mode, the signals that are generated additionally are the QS0, QS1, which are the queue status signals. Then you have the S2, S1 and S0 complements. They are the status signals. Then we have an additional lock bar, then request and the ground signals. Whereas in the case of the normal mode of operation, the same pins 24 to pin number 31, their signals are INTA, interrupt acknowledged, ALE address latch enable, data enable, DT oblique R bar, data transmit or receive, M oblique IO bar, HLDA, hold and write bar control signals. The maximum mode of operation is for the multi-process environment, whereas the minimum mode of operation, it is for the single processor system environment. So that is another major difference, where the minimum mode, this 8086 operates in a single processor environment, whereas in a multi-processor environment, the system operates in a maximum mode. In the maximum mode interfacing, the master slave and the multiplexing and several such control signals are required. Whenever you operate in a multi-processor environment, so it is not that all the processors will have the same rights. So in those cases, the system may operate in a master-slave process or in a multiplexing. So in a master-slave, one of the processor will be master. Maybe if you say that the master is 8086, and if you have a co-processor attached to the 8086 environment, we have a multi-processor environment. In such case, the 8087, which is a co-processor, operates in a slave mode, and the 8086 will operate into the master mode. So clearly, in a multi-processor environment, the system operates in the maximum mode, where they operate in the master-slave process approach. And in case of a minimum mode, there is no such need, because there is only one single processor. So no master-slave concept is required in the case of a minimum mode of operation. Then in maximum mode, a bus controller is required, because the basic signals, which were the ALE, data enable, data transmit oblique receive, then INTA, etc., all those signals are not functional in the maximum mode. There is no signal as a IO read, IO write, there is a read oblique write bar in the case of a maximum mode of operation. So those signals are to be generated. We will see how those signals can be generated. So in the maximum mode, so the signals that will be additionally produced will be the memory read, memory write, IO write, and some other control signals. We'll see those signals in the next coming video when we discuss about the maximum mode of operation. Then let us see the signals which are responsible for the minimum mode of operation. Taking a recap of the 8086 CPU again, and when you look at all the pins, you find that there are certain control signals, or rather status signals, which are S3 to S6, base signals, S3 to S6. Of these, the signal S3 and S4 is responsible for selecting those registers which are responsible for calculating the physical addresses, or for selecting, equivalently saying, for selecting the segment registers. Which particular segment register is selected, that status will be indicated by the S3 and S4 pin. Then you have the other signals called the ML oblique MX bar, which connected to the high means minimum mode, and the other signals being hold, HLDA, write, MIU bar, DT oblique R bar, data enable bar, and ALE and the INTA bar. So these are the signals which are responsible for minimum mode, of which the signal S3 and S4, they are indicating, or they indicate the status of the segment register. If these two bits are 0, 0, it is extra segment selected. If it is 0, 1, the SS is operative. If it is 1, 0, the code segment or none is operative. And if it is 1, 1, then it is the data segment that is operative. And these registers or segment registers, we know that they are helpful in calculating the physical address of the memory. Then let us come back and see what is the configuration for the minimum mode system. We said the minimum mode operation is something that this processor is backward compatible to its predecessors. And the predecessor is, let's say, 8085 system, which operates only in the single processor environment, having minimum signal and the minimum configuration. So as can be seen here, though the differences are there with the 8085 and 8086, there you have the 8-bit data bus, here we have a 16-bit data bus. There you have the 16-bit address, here we have the 20-bit address. So those differences are to be kept in mind, but otherwise, as far as the configuration is concerned, the minimum mode configuration is visible on the screen in front of you. So leaving the basic differences in terms of the circuitry of the chip itself. So otherwise, as far as the address generation techniques, the interfacing techniques remain same as with its predecessors. What we see here, that to interface with the other devices such as the IOs and the memory, we require to latch or demultiplex the address in the data lines, for which we require the transceivers or the latches and the transceivers. Let's look at this figure very closely and see what these additional components are in the minimum mode. Let me first name these components and then go with the explanation. We require an 8284 clock generator. That means 8086 doesn't have its own inbuilt or on-chip clock generator. It is required to have an extra chip like 8284, which is a clock generator. So this clock generator signal provides the clock signals to the 8086. And this operates in different modes of operation. Those modes, of course, we'll see when we discuss, when we devote a full lecture in the discussion of 8284 clock generator IC. The other chips are on the right. You have 8282 address latches. And we know the purpose of the latch. The purpose of the latch is it separates the address in the data lines which are internally multiplexed within the microprocessor 8086. And for this, what are the configuration or how do you interface this 8282 with the 8086 microprocessor? We can see the basic signals. The 8282 has an output enable signal which is low enabled, so we need to ground it. It has a strobe which is something similar to the chip select line, so which is connected to the high ALE, address latch enable. So the moment the processor generates an ALE signal, so the latches becomes or they get activated. Now whatever is the signal, address signal A0 to A15, they will be latched at the output. And otherwise, they will be treated as the 16-bit data lines. But onto the 16-bit data lines, we can either get the data from the external sources to or towards the 8086, or we can transfer from the 8086 to the IO devices, external devices. That means we need to set the direction whether you want, because these two lines now being different. The address lines are different in the external world. The data lines are separate in the real world. So when we say we have an independent set of data lines in the real world, those data lines can receive or transmit. So we have to select a mechanism through which we can direct these lines to only read it, or we can direct these lines to transmit the data for the IO devices. So what do we need for this kind of selection is, we require an IC which is called the transceiver IC 8286. So that the control line from the processor DEN, data enable, so this enables, output enables, so this enables this particular chip, and when DT oblique R bar is connected to the T line, DT oblique R bar, when R bar is R bar, definitely is R is low activated. When it is low, when this line is low, so the data will be received from the external source to the microprocessor. When DT oblique R bar is high, the data will be transmitted from the 8086 to the external one. So in addition to this basic configuration, we can also connect a memory for which the control signals, or we can even connect some other like DMA controller, which provides the flexibility so that the IOs and the memory can interact directly with each other. So all those control signals are additional with the M/IO bar, whether you want to interact with the IOs or the memory. The read bar, write bar, the hold, HLDA for the signals like DMA controller, INTR and INTA. So we find that this particular circuitry, it behaves in the minimum mode configuration. So let me again tell you that the minimum configuration requires a clock generator 8284, a set of latches, because there are 20 lines to be latched, so you require at least 3 1-byte latches like 8282. We require 3 of them. So taking a recap, the components that are required for the minimum mode, you require an 8284 IC, which is a clock generator IC. You require a set of the latches, at least 3 of them, because you have the 20-bit address lines. So 8282 being 8-bit latch, you require 3 of them. Then we require the 8286 transceivers, because when we separate the data lines from the address lines, when we demultiplex them, we can either receive or transmit, so as to select the direction, whether you want the reception or transmission. So we require the transceivers like 8286, and this direction can be selected by using the data enable and the DT oblique R bar together. So when it is low, the chip is activated. When DT oblique R bar is low, the IC is set for the receive operation. When it is high, the IC is selected for the transmit operation. Coming with the timing diagram of the minimum mode. So the figure, there are 2 figures, one for the read cycle timing diagram, another for the write cycle timing diagram. So what do you see in the read cycle timing diagram? We have the different T states at the top, where a machine cycle can have more than one T state. When the ALE signal is going high, the latches are enabled during the timing T1. During the timing cycle T2, the addresses are latched and are outputted. Now when the addresses are outputted, during the same T2 time cycle T state, time in T2 state, the read bar goes low. So that read bar signal is activated. The data enable is low, DT oblique R bar is low, indicating a receive operation. So the data from the IO devices will then be put onto the 16-bit data lines A0 to A15. That is D0 to D15. And in the next T state, T3 state, we can say T1, T2, T3. Then there is a read state, and in the next T state, the read bar is deactivated so that it indicates a operation completed. Similarly, for the write cycle, once the addresses are available after demultiplexing in the T2 T state, then when the write bar goes low, the direction of the DTR oblique it goes high, indicating a transmit operation. So that the data available on the data lines will then be put on to the external data buses. So this is how the internal read and the write cycle operates take place. Let's now discuss about the maximum mode of operation. The signals responsible for the maximum mode of operation are the RQ oblique JT 0 and 1 bar. There are two signals on two separate pins. One is RQ oblique JT1, another is RQ oblique JT0 bar. These are bus request grant signals. Lock bar for the bus priority locks control signal. S0, S1, S2 for the bus cycle status signals, and Q, S0 and Z1 for the instruction queue status. Now look at the maximum mode of operation. In maximum mode, we require, in addition to the devices that were used in the normal mode of operation, now we require not many, since the system will operate in a multi-processor environment. So we require, because the buses will be under the control of the slave as well. So we have another kind of devices called as a 8288, which is a bus controller, which generates the bus command and the control signals. So they are provided through the S2, S1 and S0 signal, which are available on the 8086. So these three signals are sent as input to the 8288 to generate 8 different control and the command signals. Mind it, S0, S1, S2, these three signals are on the 8086 chip. And if it is to operate in a multi-processor environment, we would require another IC called as a 8282, to which these three signals will be inputted, thus generating 8 different command control signals. What these command control signals are? If the input is 000, that is S0, S1, S2 are 000, so the output of the 8288 on the first pin will be the INTA bar, interrupt acknowledged. So this will remain activated for the 2 cycles. Then 001 indicates the IO read cycle, IO write cycle for 010, a halt operation 011 on these three signals, status signals, instruction fetch when it is 100, memory read and memory write cycle when this is 101 and 111. And the corresponding commands are that are generated are INTA for IO read, IO write cycle, advanced IO write, memory read, the memory write and the advanced memory write. So these are the different operations of the commands that are generated. Then with the help of the QS0 and QS1, we can have 4 status informations. And what these status informations are, when they are both 00, the queue is not operating. So no operation. during the last clock cycle, nothing was taken from the queue. We know that the purpose of the queue. Queue in advance receives the instruction from the memory. It stores at least 6 instructions from the memory, so that the processor doesn't have to wait for an instruction from the memory to be read. It is already available in the queue. So if the status of the QS0 and QS1 is 00, so this means the instruction from the queue has not been taken out. We haven't performed any operation on it. If the status is 01, QS0 and QS1 is 01, then the first byte, the byte taken from the queue was the first byte of the instruction. Then it is 10, queue is empty. Maybe such that certain operations, the queue is required to be empty. For example, if we suppose say that some instructions were executing and the next instruction that is encountered for execution is a jump instruction. And we know that if a program is to jump to another location, it is not only for the access of one instruction. This might be and for accessing quite few number of instructions till the task is completed. Or maybe a routine was called, where some routine has been written. We call the routine, and when the routine ends, we return back to the place where we were. So in those cases, while the current instruction was executed, and if it has to jump to a particular subroutine, we have to reload a fresh address and the fresh instruction. We have to first empty the queue so that new set of instructions can come and reside into the queue. So that is the time when we can say that queue is empty. So that status of queue empty can be indicated by QS1 and QS0. Then the 1 and 1, it means the subsequent byte. The byte read from the queue is a subsequent byte. So the byte taken from the queue was a subsequent byte of the instruction. It means I read one instruction. When I read the second instruction from the queue, that is a subsequent instruction. Unless some kind of decision is taken to empty the queue, so that it is out of the normal sequence of operation, we have to fetch from somewhere else. So this QS1 and QS0 indicates the status information. Then we have the local bus control signals. Now in a maximum mode, when it is operating in a multiprocessor environment, there is no signal like HLDA or the hold. Rather, some new signals are generated. They are something as a RQ/JT0, RQ/JT1. So these two signals take the place of the hold and the HLDA, and they provide a prioritized bus access mechanism for accessing the local bus. Now that means now the local bus, instead of being available readily for any kind of transfer, so here now some kind of priority system comes into picture. So these two signal requests of the grant, they provide a prioritized bus access mechanism. Then like AE and the IOB are generally grounded. CEN pin is usually tied to +5 volts. And the significance of the FCP, PD and output depends upon the status of the IOB. That means if the IOB is grounded, it acts as a master cascade to control the 8259, else it acts as a peripheral data enable used in the multiple bus configuration. Let us see some more details of it. The maximum mode of operation. What do you see here? The configuration for the maximum mode. We can find out that the system looks complex. And when we say complex, it is not a single processor environment. It could be a multi-processor environment. So let us see what additions have been done in this configuration. We definitely require the clock generator for the 8086 to operate, because it doesn't have its own the clock generator. So we have to have the clock generator in the minimum mode as well as the maximum mode. As said, the three signals which are available on the 8086, S0 bar, S1 bar, S2 bar, they act as input to the 8288 bus controller. And these three control status signals, they provide at the output of the 8288 8 different control signals. These are the something as a INTA bar, memory read, memory write, IO read, IO write, etc. Then we have chip select logic, which can be used for the different chip select lines, and this can be with the help of the BH0, that is BH bar, bus high enable bar, and the A0. So these two can be used for generating the different chip select lines. Then as usual, we would require the latches, either 2 or 3, at the most 3, because there are 20 address lines that is to be separated. Or if you can go with the 2 of them, so that you need to demultiplex only the AD0 lines, that is AD0 to AD15. Then you require the data buffers, and this data buffers, it is a chip like 74245. Then, as you know, that the chip select lines were provided, and they are provided for the different devices like the RAM, ROM, etc., or for the IOs. So these chip select lines, they are connected to the chip select lines of the different IO or the different memories. And then the address lines, 20 address lines will then be used for addressing the different memories of the different IO devices, depending upon the kind of configuration. If you have a IO mapped IO, the 16 address lines are required for the IO addressing. But if it is a memory mapped IO, in those cases the same 20 address lines will be required to address the IO devices. Whereas for accessing the memory, you definitely require the 20 address lines. And depending upon how your memory is organized, whether it is organized in the odd, even banks or only a single bank, then accordingly the BHE and the A0 bar can take care of those in selecting either only the odd byte, odd memory bank, or only the even memory bank, or both of them, or none of them. So let's take a recap what we have seen in this video. We started with the concept of the minimum or maximum mode of operation. This is the theme of the video. We started with the basic pin diagram, where the annotations were made for the minimum and the maximum mode pins. Then we specifically discussed the minimum mode and the maximum mode differences. Then we saw the configuration and the pin definitions which are required for the minimum mode, a complete configuration which required the latches, the transceivers, and of course the clock generator, and some other control signals for the M/IO bar, read, write, etc. Then we saw the timing diagram for the IO read, or the read cycle and the write cycle for the minimum mode configuration. Then we discussed about the memory maximum mode organization. What are those different signals that are responsible for? What are the status lines, and how do you make use of those status signals S0, S1, S2 to generate the different multiprocessor environment signals? Then we saw how to generate the chip select lines with the help of the BHE bar oblique A0 bar, A0, and saw that these different chip select lines can be used for selecting the different IOs and the different memory signals. Also, we could organize the memory in the even and the odd banks, so that an efficient memory organization organization can take place. So that's all in this video. See you in the next lecture.